The Grand Line was a place of endless mystery, a sea where the impossible became reality and the extraordinary was commonplace. It was here, under a sky painted with swirling clouds and a sun that seemed to burn brighter than anywhere else, that the Straw Hat Pirates found themselves sailing toward an island shrouded in legend. The island had no name, at least not one that anyone could remember, but whispers of its existence had reached even the ears of Monkey D. Luffy, the rubber-bodied captain of the crew. The rumors spoke of an island that devoured devil fruits, a place where the powers granted by these mystical fruits were nullified, leaving their users vulnerable and powerless. For Luffy, whose very strength relied on his gum fruit abilities, this was a challenge he couldn't ignore. The Thousand Sunny cut through the waves with ease, its lion figurehead gleaming in the sunlight. On deck, the crew was in high spirits, though a sense of unease lingered beneath the surface. Nami, the navigator, clutched her log post tightly, her brow furrowed as she studied its erratic movements. This island. It's like it's alive, she muttered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the wind. Zoro, the swordsman, leaned against the railing, his 3 katana resting at his side. His sharp eyes scanned the horizon, ever vigilant for danger. If it's alive, then it's just another thing to cut down, he said with a smirk, though his tone carried a hint of caution. Sanji, the chef, lit a cigarette and exhaled a plume of smoke, his gaze fixed on the distant silhouette of the island. Whatever's waiting for us there, I hope it's got a decent kitchen. I'm tired of cooking for nothing but sea kings and idiots, he quipped, earning a glare from Usopp, the sniper, who was busy tinkering with one of his inventions. Luffy, as always, stood at the bow of the ship, his straw hat tilted back as he grinned at the approaching landmass. This is gonna be awesome. An island that eats devil fruits? I've gotta see this for myself. His enthusiasm was infectious, but it did little to ease the tension among his crew. Chopper, the reindeer doctor, clung to Robin's arm, his wide eyes filled with both curiosity and fear. What if it's true? What if we lose our powers? He asked, his voice trembling. Robin, the archaeologist, placed a reassuring hand on his head. We've faced worse, haven't we? Besides, Luffy wouldn't lead us into something he couldn't handle, she said, though her calm demeanor couldn't completely mask her own concerns. As the Thousand Sunny drew closer to the island, the crew began to notice strange phenomena. The water around the island was unnaturally still, as if held in place by some unseen force. The air grew heavier, and the sounds of the sea seemed to fade away, replaced by an eerie silence. Even Frankie, the shipwright, who was usually brimming with confidence, felt a chill run down his spine. This place. It's like it's sucking the energy out of everything, he muttered, adjusting his sunglasses. Brook, the skeletal musician, strummed a few notes on his guitar, the sound oddly muted. Yo-ho-ho, it seems even music can't escape this island's grasp, he said, his usual cheerfulness tinged with unease. The crew's first encounter with the island's strange properties came as soon as they set foot on its shores. Luffy, eager to explore, leapt off the ship and onto the beach, only to find that his rubbery limbs no longer stretched as they should. He punched the air experimentally, but his fist barely moved, as if weighed down by an invisible force. What the? My powers aren't working, he exclaimed, his voice a mix of frustration and disbelief. The rest of the crew followed suit, each discovering that their devil fruit abilities had been nullified. Zoro's swords felt heavier in his hands, and even Sanji's fiery kicks lacked their usual intensity. Usopp's slingshot seemed to misfire, and Chopper's transformations were sluggish and incomplete. Only Robin, who relied more on her intellect than her powers, seemed unaffected, though even she felt the oppressive aura of the island. Their initial confusion was quickly replaced by alarm as they were ambushed by a group of strange, shadowy creatures. The creatures moved with unnatural speed, their forms shifting and twisting as if made of living darkness. Luffy, despite his weakened state, charged forward, his fists clenched. I don't need my powers to take you down, he shouted, delivering a powerful punch that sent one of the creatures flying. Zoro drew his swords, his movements slower than usual but no less precise. Three-sword style, onigiri, he roared, slicing through 2 of the creatures with a single strike. Sanji spun into action, his legs a blur as he delivered a series of rapid kicks. Diable jambe, he yelled, though the flames that usually accompanied his attack were conspicuously absent. Usopp fired off a barrage of projectiles, his aim still true despite the lack of his usual precision. Take this, you freaks, he yelled, his voice cracking slightly. The fight was intense, the crew forced to rely on their raw strength and ingenuity rather than their devil fruit powers. Chopper, in his smaller form, darted between the creatures, using his medical knowledge to target their weak points. Robin, though unable to summon her extra limbs, used her agility and combat skills to hold her own. Frankie, ever the inventor, pulled out a makeshift weapon from his arsenal, its mechanical whirring a stark contrast to the island's eerie silence. Super! Frankie radical beam, he shouted, though the attack lacked its usual explosive power. Brook, his sword gleaming in the dim light, danced through the battlefield, his movements fluid and precise. Yo-ho-ho, it seems even without my powers, I'm still a force to be reckoned with, he said, his laughter echoing through the air. As the last of the shadowy creatures fell, the crew regrouped, their breaths heavy and their bodies bruised. Luffy, though visibly tired, wore a determined grin. That was tough, but we made it, he said, his voice filled with his usual optimism. Nami, however, wasn't so sure. This is just the beginning, she said, her voice low. If this island can nullify our powers, what else is it capable of? Her words hung in the air, a chilling reminder of the unknown dangers that lay ahead. Zoro sheathed his swords, his expression grim. Whatever's waiting for us, we'll face it head on, he said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. As the crew ventured further into the island, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The trees seemed to twist and turn, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The ground beneath their feet felt unstable, as if it might give way at any moment. And yet, despite the growing sense of dread, they pressed on, driven by their unyielding determination and the bonds that tied them together. For Luffy, this was more than just an adventure, it was a test of his strength, his resolve, and his ability to protect his crew. And for the Straw Hat Pirates, it was a reminder that even in the face of the unknown, they were stronger together. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the island, the crew made camp, their fire a small beacon of light in the encroaching darkness. Luffy sat by the fire, his straw hat pulled low over his eyes. "We'll figure this out," he said, his voice steady. "No island's gonna stop us from becoming the Pirate King." His words were met with nods of agreement, the crew's spirits lifted by his unwavering confidence. But as they settled in for the night, none of them could shake the feeling that the island was far from finished with them. Somewhere in the depths of the island, a larger threat loomed, its presence felt but not yet seen. And as the fire crackled and the stars began to appear in the sky, the Straw Hat Pirates prepared themselves for the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that their greatest test was yet to come. The Straw Hat Pirates stood at the edge of the island, their eyes wide with a mix of awe and dread. The island, known as Voratia, loomed before them like a living beast, its jagged cliffs and pulsating vines giving it an almost sentient appearance. The air was thick with the scent of decay and the faint hum of energy that seemed to sap their strength. Luffy, ever the fearless captain, clenched his fists, his straw hat casting a shadow over his determined face. "This place is creepy, but we've faced worse," he said, though the unease in his voice betrayed his confidence. Nami, clutching her Klimatak tightly, shot him a glare. "Worse? Luffy, this island eats devil fruits. That means half of us are walking targets." Her words hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the stakes they faced. As they ventured deeper into the island, the ground beneath them shifted unnervingly, as if the very earth was alive. Zoro, his 3 swords at the ready, scanned the surroundings with narrowed eyes. "Stay sharp. This place doesn't just eat devil fruits, it's got a taste for intruders too," he muttered. Usopp, trembling but trying to maintain his composure, fiddled with his slingshot. "Maybe we should have listened to that old man in the village. He said no one who enters Voratia ever comes back." Sanji, lighting a cigarette despite the oppressive atmosphere, exhaled a plume of smoke. "Quit whining, Usopp. If this island wants a fight, we'll give it one." The tension among the crew was palpable, but it wasn't just the island that weighed on their minds. Earlier, they had encountered a mysterious figure who warned them of a secondary threat, a rival pirate crew known as the Black Tide, led by the ruthless Captain Dredge. The figure had hinted that the Black Tide was already on the island, seeking the same treasure the Straw Hats were after, the Heart of Voratia, a legendary artifact said to grant unimaginable power. The revelation had sparked a heated debate among the crew, with some questioning the wisdom of continuing their mission. As they pressed forward, the island's malevolence became more apparent. Strange, vine-like tendrils lashed out at them, forcing the crew to fight back. Luffy, despite the island's ability to nullify devil fruit powers, relied on his raw strength and agility, dodging the vines and delivering powerful punches. "Gamu Gamu no. Wait, never mind," he grumbled, realizing his usual attacks were off the table. Zoro, on the other hand, was in his element, slicing through the vines with precision. "This is nothing compared to Mihawk's training," he said with a smirk. Nami, using her Klimatak, summoned a gust of wind to blow the vines away, while Usopp fired explosive pellets to create a path. Their teamwork was tested further when they encountered a massive, plant-like creature that seemed to be the island's guardian. The creature, with its glowing eyes and razor-sharp thorns, lunged at them with terrifying speed. Luffy, ever the strategist, shouted, "Zoro, distract it." Nami, Usopp, hit it from a distance. Sanji, with me. The crew sprang into action, each member playing their part. Zoro charged at the creature, his swords flashing as he drew its attention. Nami and Usopp unleashed a barrage of attacks, while Sanji and Luffy closed in for the finishing blow. Despite the odds, they managed to defeat the creature, but not without sustaining injuries. As they caught their breath, a new threat emerged, the Black Tide. Captain Dredge, a towering figure with a scarred face and a menacing grin, stepped forward, flanked by his crew. Well, if it isn't the Straw Hats. I was hoping we'd run into you," he sneered. Luffy, his fists clenched, glared at Dredge. "What do you want?" Dredge chuckled darkly. "The same thing you do, the heart of Veracia. But unlike you, I'm not afraid to do whatever it takes to get it." The tension between the two crews escalated, and a fierce battle ensued. Luffy and Dredge clashed in a brutal hand-to-hand fight, their blows shaking the ground. Zoro faced off against Dredge's first mate, a swordsman with a reputation for cruelty. Their duel was intense, each strike echoing through the air. Nami and Usopp, working together, used their wits and gadgets to outmaneuver the Black Tide's ranged attackers. Sanji, ever the chivalrous fighter, took on multiple opponents at once, his kicks swift and precise. Amid the chaos, a hint of betrayal emerged. Robin, who had been unusually quiet, was seen speaking with one of the Black Tide's members. The sight sent a ripple of unease through the crew. "Robin, what are you doing?" Nami demanded, her voice tinged with fear. Robin's expression was unreadable as she replied, "There are things you don't understand, Nami. Sometimes, sacrifices must be made." The words struck a chord, leaving the crew to wonder if they could truly trust each other. As the battle raged on, the island itself seemed to react, the ground trembling and the air growing heavier. The stakes had never been higher, and the Straw Hats were forced to confront not only the dangers of Veracia and the Black Tide but also the fractures within their own ranks. Luffy, battered but resolute, shouted, "We're not giving up. No matter what, we're getting out of here together." His words rallied the crew, but the challenges ahead were daunting. With the heart of Veracia still out of reach and the threat of betrayal looming, the Straw Hats would need to dig deep to survive. The fight scenes were a testament to their creativity and resilience. Luffy, unable to rely on his devil fruit powers, adapted by using the environment to his advantage, swinging from vines and using rocks as projectiles. Zoro's swordsmanship was as sharp as ever, his blades cutting through the island's defenses with ease. Nami's weather manipulation and Usopp's ingenuity proved invaluable, while Sanji's martial arts skills kept the Black Tide at bay. Even Robin, despite the growing mistrust, used her abilities to gather information and provide tactical support. As the sun began to set, casting an eerie glow over the island, the Straw Hats regrouped, their spirits bruised but unbroken. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, they would face whatever came their way, together. The island of Veracia had tested them in ways they had never imagined, but it had also revealed their strengths and weaknesses. With the heart of Veracia still out of reach and the Black Tide closing in, the Straw Hats knew that the true battle was just beginning. Luffy and his crew, battered but determined, pressed forward through the dense jungle of the mysterious island known as Glutton's Maw. The island was infamous for its ravenous appetite, not just for food, but for devil fruits themselves. Strange, pulsating vines snaked across the ground, and the air was thick with an eerie energy that seemed to sap their strength. Nami clutched her Klimatak tightly, her eyes darting nervously. "This place feels alive," she muttered. "Like it's watching us." Luffy, ever the optimist, grinned. "Don't worry. We'll beat whatever's here and get our powers back." But even he couldn't ignore the unsettling sensation that something, or someone, was lurking just out of sight. Their journey took them to a clearing where the trees thinned, revealing a massive stone altar covered in glowing runes. Standing atop it was a figure cloaked in shadow, their presence radiating an aura of danger. As the Straw Hats approached, the figure stepped into the light, revealing a tall, wiry man with sharp features and a predatory grin. His eyes glowed faintly, and his hands crackled with an unfamiliar energy. Well, he drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "If it isn't the infamous Straw Hat Pirates. I've been waiting for you." Luffy's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" The man smirked. "Call me Vorax. I'm the one who's been feeding this island its devil fruits. And now, I've got a special treat for it, you." Vorax's introduction sent a ripple of tension through the crew. Zoro's hand instinctively went to his swords, Though he cursed under his breath as he remembered his devil fruit-enhanced attacks were useless here. Sanji lit a cigarette, his eyes locked on Vorax. So, you're the one causing all this trouble. What's your game? Vorax chuckled, his grin widening. My game? Simple. I'm here to test the limits of this island's hunger. And you're the perfect subjects. Before anyone could react, Vorax lunged, his movements impossibly fast. He aimed a glowing fist at Luffy, who barely managed to dodge. The ground where Luffy had been standing erupted in a burst of energy, leaving a smoldering crater. The fight was on. Zoro charged in, his swords flashing as he aimed a series of precise strikes at Vorax. But the man was unnaturally agile, dodging and weaving with ease. Not bad, Vorax taunted, but you'll need more than that to hit me. He retaliated with a sweeping kick that sent Zoro sprawling. Sanji, seeing his comrade fall, launched a flurry of kicks at Vorax, each one crackling with the force of his haki. Vorax blocked them with his forearms, his grin never faltering. You're strong, he admitted, but strength alone won't save you here. With a sudden burst of speed, Vorax closed the distance and landed a devastating punch to Sanji's chest, sending him flying into a tree. Luffy, furious at seeing his friends hurt, charged forward, his fists clenched. Gamu Gamu no. He began, but Vorax interrupted him with a laugh. Still trying to use your devil fruit powers? How quaint. He raised a hand, and the runes on the altar flared to life. Luffy felt a strange pull, as if something was being ripped from him. His arms, normally stretchy and rubbery, reverted to their natural state. Vorax smirked. This island devours devil fruits, remember? You're powerless here. Luffy gritted his teeth, refusing to back down. I don't need my powers to beat you. He launched a punch, but Vorax caught it effortlessly, his grip like iron. Just as things seemed dire, a new voice rang out. Enough. A figure dropped from the trees, landing gracefully between Luffy and Vorax. It was a woman with fiery red hair and a determined expression. She wore a sleek, armored outfit and carried a pair of curved daggers. Vorax's smirk faltered for the first time. You? He growled. The woman turned to Luffy and his crew. I'm Kayla, she said quickly. I've been tracking Vorax for weeks. He's not just feeding devil fruits to this island, he's trying to create a weapon that can control their power. Luffy blinked, confused but intrigued. Whose side are you on? Kayla smirked. Right now? Yours. But don't get too comfortable. Vorax recovered quickly, his anger evident. You think you can stop me, Kayla? You're just as powerless here as they are. Kayla's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. She lunged at Vorax, her daggers flashing in the dim light. The two clashed in a blur of motion, their attacks and counters a deadly dance. Kayla's speed and precision were impressive, but Vorax's raw power was overwhelming. He landed a brutal kick to her side, sending her skidding across the ground. But Kayla wasn't done. She flipped to her feet and hurled one of her daggers at Vorax. He dodged, but the blade grazed his arm, leaving a deep cut. Vorax hissed in pain, his eyes blazing with fury. The Straw Hats, seeing their chance, regrouped. Zoro and Sanji attacked from opposite sides, forcing Vorax to divide his attention. Luffy, though powerless, relied on his raw strength and determination, landing a solid punch to Vorax's jaw. Vorax staggered, but he wasn't finished. With a roar, he unleashed a wave of energy that sent everyone flying. Kayla, however, managed to stay on her feet. She dashed forward, her remaining dagger aimed at Vorax's heart. But he caught her wrist, his grip crushing. You've always been a thorn in my side, he snarled. But this ends now. Before Vorax could deliver the final blow, a sudden tremor shook the island. The ground beneath them cracked, and the altar's runes began to glow brighter than ever. Kayla's eyes widened. The island. It's reacting to the fight, she shouted. We need to get out of here. Luffy, ever the stubborn captain, shook his head. Not until we stop him, Vorax laughed maniacally. You fools. You've only made it stronger. The island seemed to come alive, the vines writhing and the air growing heavier. The Straw Hats and Kayla found themselves surrounded, their options dwindling. As the chaos unfolded, Kayla made a decision. Listen to me, she said, her voice urgent. I can hold him off, but you need to destroy the altar. It's the source of the island's power. Luffy hesitated, but Nami grabbed his arm. We don't have a choice. Trust her. Reluctantly, Luffy nodded. All right. Let's do it. The crew split up, with Zoro and Sanji covering Luffy as he made his way to the altar. Kayla, meanwhile, faced Vorax alone. You're outnumbered, she said, her voice steady. Give it up, Vorax sneered. You're the one who's outnumbered, Kayla. This island is on my side. The final clash was a whirlwind of chaos and desperation. Kayla fought with everything she had, her daggers a blur as she countered Vorax's relentless attacks. But he was too strong, his energy-enhanced strikes overwhelming her defenses. Just as Vorax prepared to deliver the final blow, Luffy reached the altar. With a roar, he smashed his fist into the glowing runes, shattering them. The island let out a deafening scream, and the vines began to wither. Vorax stumbled, his power fading. No, he cried, but it was too late. The island's hunger was sated, and its grip on their devil fruits was broken. As the dust settled, the Straw Hats regrouped, battered but victorious. Kayla stood over Vorax's unconscious form, her expression unreadable. You did it, she said simply. Luffy grinned. We did it. Thanks for the help. Kayla nodded, but her eyes were distant. Don't thank me yet. This isn't over. Before anyone could ask what she meant, she turned and disappeared into the jungle, leaving the crew with more questions than answers. The island, now silent and still, seemed almost peaceful. But the Straw Hats knew better. Their journey was far from over, and the addition of Kayla, ally, rival, or wildcard, had only complicated things further. Luffy and his crew had finally reached the mysterious island known as Glutton's Maw, a place shrouded in legends of devouring devil fruits and rendering their users powerless. The Straw Hats had been warned by a cryptic old sailor, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality of the island's insidious nature. The moment they set foot on the blackened, jagged shores, a strange energy pulsed through the air, and Luffy felt a faint but unnerving tug at his core, as if something was trying to pull the very essence of his gum fruit from his body. The crew pressed on, determined to uncover the island's secrets and retrieve a rare artifact said to be hidden deep within its cavernous heart, a relic that could potentially reverse the island's curse. As they ventured deeper into the island's dense, shadowy jungle, the crew began to notice strange phenomena. Zoro's swords felt heavier, as if the metal itself was resisting his grip. Nami's clean attack sparked erratically, and even Frankie's mechanical enhancements seemed to glitch and sputter. The island was alive, and it was hungry. The tension among the crew grew palpable, their usual banter replaced by wary silence. Luffy, however, remained undeterred, his usual grin plastered on his face. No island's gonna stop us, he declared, though the unease in his voice betrayed his confidence. The first major confrontation came when they reached a massive clearing, where the ground was littered with the skeletal remains of pirates and marines alike. At the center stood a towering figure clad in tattered robes, his face obscured by a grotesque mask resembling a gaping maw. This was Vorax, the self-proclaimed guardian of Glutton's Maw and the orchestrator of its curse. He spoke in a guttural, echoing voice, taunting the crew. You think you can defy the Maw? Your devil fruits are nothing but offerings to its hunger. Soon, you'll join the others who dared to challenge me. The battle began with a ferocity that left the Straw Hats reeling. Vorax moved with unnatural speed, his body seemingly untethered by the laws of physics. He wielded a massive scythe that glowed with an eerie, pulsating light, and with each swing, the air itself seemed to shudder. Luffy charged in, his fists coated in haki, but Vorax effortlessly dodged his attacks, countering with a devastating strike that sent Luffy flying into a tree. Zoro and Sanji joined the fray, their combined efforts barely keeping Vorax at bay. But as the fight dragged on, the crew began to notice something terrifying: their devil fruit powers were weakening. Luffy's rubbery limbs felt sluggish, and Robin's ability to sprout limbs faltered, her arms dissipating into petals before they could fully form. Just as the crew seemed on the verge of defeat, a shocking twist unfolded. Usopp, who had been hanging back to provide cover fire, suddenly stepped forward, his expression grim. "I'm sorry, guys," he said, his voice trembling. Before anyone could react, he raised his slingshot and fired a sea stone-tipped projectile at Luffy, striking him square in the chest. Luffy collapsed, his body immobilized by the sea stone's effects. The crew stared in disbelief, their trust in Usopp shattered. "Why?" Nami screamed, her voice cracking with betrayal. Usopp's eyes filled with tears as he explained. "I made a deal with Vorax. He promised to spare us if I handed over Luffy. I couldn't let us all die here." The revelation hit the crew like a tidal wave, their unity fractured by Usopp's desperate choice. Vorax laughed, a sound that echoed like a death knell. "Foolish loyalty," he sneered. "In the end, even the strongest bonds crumble before the Maw's hunger." But Luffy, though immobilized, refused to give up. "Usopp. You idiot," he muttered, his voice strained but unwavering. "We're nakama. We don't betray each other, no matter what." His words struck a chord, and Usopp's resolve wavered. Seeing an opening, Zoro and Sanji launched a coordinated attack on Vorax, their movements fueled by sheer determination. The fight escalated into a chaotic frenzy, with the crew pushing themselves to their limits despite their dwindling powers. Nami used her Kleem attack to summon a thunderstorm, the lightning strikes momentarily stunning Vorax. Frankie unleashed a barrage of missiles, their explosions illuminating the clearing in flashes of blinding light. In a moment of desperation, Chopper devised a risky plan. Using a combination of his medical knowledge and the island's unique energy, he created a serum that temporarily boosted their devil fruit abilities, though at the cost of severe strain on their bodies. "This might kill us," Chopper warned, his voice trembling. "But it's our only shot." The crew agreed, and with the serum coursing through their veins, they launched a final, all-out assault on Vorax. The battle reached its climax as Luffy, fueled by sheer willpower, broke free from the Sea Stone's effects. His body glowed with a fiery aura as he unleashed Gear Forth, his attacks landing with devastating force. Vorax, now on the defensive, tried to counter, but the combined might of the Straw Hats proved too much. With a final, earth-shattering punch, Luffy sent Vorax crashing into the ground, his mask shattering to reveal a face twisted with rage and fear. You can't defeat the Maw." Vorax screamed, his voice fading as his body disintegrated into black smoke. As the dust settled, the crew stood victorious but battered, their bodies trembling from the strain of the battle and the serum's effects. Usopp fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed. Luffy walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll talk about this later," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "Right now, we need to get off this island before it decides to finish the job." The crew regrouped and made their way back to the Thousand Sunny, their spirits weighed down by the day's events. The betrayal, the near-death experience, and the revelation of the island's true power had left them shaken. But as they sailed away from Glutton's Maw, Luffy stood at the bow of the ship, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "We're stronger than any island," he said, his voice filled with determination. "And we'll face whatever comes next together." The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the Straw Hats had been tested like never before, and they had emerged stronger, if not unscathed. The bonds of their nakama had been strained, but not broken. And as the sun set on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the sea, the crew knew that their adventure was far from over. The challenges would only grow greater, but so would their resolve. Together, they would face whatever madness the world of One Piece had in store. Luffy and his crew stood at the edge of the island, their faces etched with a mixture of awe and dread. The island, known as Voracia, was a living, breathing entity that consumed devil fruits and their powers, rendering even the most formidable abilities useless. The Straw Hats had barely escaped their last encounter with the island's guardians, but now they were back, determined to uncover its secrets and save their captured allies. The stakes had never been higher, and the clock was ticking. Voracia's core was growing unstable, threatening to erupt and destroy everything within a 100-mile radius. The crew split into teams, each tasked with a critical mission. Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji would confront the island's guardians head-on, buying time for Nami, Usopp, and Frankie to locate the core and devise a way to neutralize it. Robin and Chopper, meanwhile, scoured the island's ancient ruins for clues about its origins and weaknesses. The air was thick with tension as they moved, the ground beneath their feet pulsating with an eerie, unnatural rhythm. Luffy's team encountered the Guardians almost immediately, a trio of towering, biomechanical constructs that seemed to adapt to every attack. Zoro's blades clashed against one of the Guardians, but the creature absorbed the impact, its metallic body shifting to counter his strikes. "These things are learning our moves," Zoro growled, his frustration evident. Luffy, undeterred, launched himself at another Guardian, his fists flying in a flurry of punches. But the creature's surface rippled like liquid, dispersing the force of his attacks. "It's like hitting water," Luffy shouted, his voice tinged with both annoyance and curiosity. Sanji, ever the strategist, observed the Guardians' movements closely. "They're not just adapting, they're predicting," he realized. "We need to mix things up, throw them off their rhythm." He launched a series of rapid kicks, each one targeting a different pressure point. The Guardian staggered, its movements faltering for a split second. They're not invincible," Sanji called out. Luffy and Zoro nodded, their eyes narrowing with determination. Meanwhile, Nami's team navigated the island's treacherous terrain, dodging geysers of molten rock and collapsing cliffs. Usopp's sharpshooting skills proved invaluable as he took out sentry drones that patrolled the area. "This place is like a death trap," Usopp exclaimed, his voice trembling. "But we can't stop now." Frankie, using his mechanical expertise, hacked into the island's systems, uncovering a map of the core's location. "It's deep underground," he said, his tone grim. "We'll need to move fast." In the ruins, Robin and Chopper discovered a series of ancient carvings that depicted the island's creation. "It was built as a weapon," Robin murmured, her fingers tracing the intricate symbols. "A failsafe to destroy itself if it ever went out of control." Chopper's eyes widened. "That's it. If we can trigger the failsafe, we can stop the eruption." But the carvings also warned of a guardian protecting the failsafe mechanism, a being of immense power that had never been defeated. Back with Luffy's team, the fight grew more intense. The guardians began to merge, forming a colossal entity that towered over them. Its attacks were devastating, each blow shaking the ground and sending shockwaves through the air. Luffy gritted his teeth, his body aching from the relentless assault. "We can't keep this up forever," he muttered. Then, an idea struck him. "Zoro, Sanji, cover me," he shouted. "I'm going to try something crazy." Luffy closed his eyes, focusing on the rhythm of his heartbeat and the flow of his haki. He remembered Rayleigh's training, the lessons about pushing his limits. With a deep breath, he activated Gear 4, his body swelling with power. But this time, he didn't stop there. He pushed further, his muscles straining as he tapped into a new level of strength. The air around him crackled with energy, and his fists glowed with a blinding light. "Gear 5, Titan Strike," he roared, launching himself at the merged guardian. The impact was cataclysmic, the force of Luffy's punch ripping through the guardian's defenses and shattering its core. The creature let out a deafening roar before collapsing into a heap of broken metal. Luffy landed heavily, his body trembling from the exertion. "That took a lot out of me," he panted, a grin spreading across his face. Zoro and Sanji stared at him, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. "Remind me not to get on your bad side," Zoro said dryly. As the dust settled, Robin's voice crackled over the transponder snail. "We've found the failsafe, but there's a problem, it's guarded by something ancient. We need backup, now." Luffy's team wasted no time, racing toward the ruins. When they arrived, they were met with a sight that sent chills down their spines, a massive, serpentine creature with scales that shimmered like molten gold. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its very presence seemed to warp the air around it. The battle that followed was unlike anything they had faced before. The serpent moved with terrifying speed, its attacks precise and deadly. Luffy, still recovering from his earlier exertion, struggled to keep up. Zoro and Sanji fought valiantly, but their attacks barely scratched the creature's scales. Robin and Chopper worked frantically to activate the failsafe, their hands moving over the ancient mechanism with desperate urgency. Just as it seemed all hope was lost, Usopp and Frankie arrived, carrying a device they had cobbled together from the island's wreckage. "This should disrupt its energy field," Frankie shouted, throwing the device at the serpent. The creature roared in pain as the device activated, its movement slowing. Luffy seized the opportunity, channeling the last of his strength into a final, devastating punch. The serpent let out a final, ear-splitting scream before collapsing, its body disintegrating into golden dust. With the Guardian defeated, Robin and Chopper activated the failsafe. The island's core began to stabilize, the pulsating energy fading into a gentle hum. The Straw Hats gathered together, their bodies battered but their spirits unbroken. "We did it," Luffy said, his voice filled with pride. "But we're not done yet. This island still has secrets, and we're going to uncover them all." As they prepared to delve deeper into Voracious mysteries, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. The island had tested their limits, but it had also revealed their potential. They had grown stronger, not just as individuals but as a team. And as they faced the challenges ahead, they knew one thing for certain: no matter what lay in store, they would face it together. The air on the island was thick with tension, a palpable energy that seemed to hum with the chaotic power of the devil fruits being devoured by the land itself. Luffy stood at the center of the chaos, his straw hat tilted low over his eyes, his fists clenched as he faced off against the island's guardian, a monstrous entity known as the Devourer. The creature was a grotesque fusion of rock and flesh, its body pulsating with the stolen powers of countless devil fruits. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its jagged maw dripped with a corrosive substance that sizzled as it hit the ground. Around Luffy, his crewmates were locked in their own desperate battles, each pushed to their absolute limits as they fought to survive the island's relentless hunger. Zoro, his three swords gleaming in the dim light, clashed with a towering warrior made entirely of molten lava. The heat was unbearable, each swing of the warrior's flaming sword sending waves of searing air that threatened to melt Zoro's blades. But Zoro was relentless, his movements a blur as he adapted to the intense heat. He shifted his stance, using haki to reinforce his swords and shield himself from the worst of the flames. With a roar, he unleashed a devastating triple slash, the force of his attack cutting through the lava warrior's defenses and sending molten chunks flying. The warrior staggered, but Zoro didn't let up. He pushed forward, his muscles screaming in protest as he delivered a final, earth-shattering blow that shattered the creature into 1,000 fiery fragments. Meanwhile, Sanji was locked in a high-speed duel with a shadowy figure that seemed to phase in and out of reality. The figure moved with unnatural speed, its attacks coming from every angle as it exploited Sanji's blind spots. But Sanji was no ordinary fighter. His observation haki flared to life, allowing him to anticipate the figure's movements and counter with precision. He spun through the air, his legs a blur as he delivered a series of rapid kicks, each one landing with bone-crushing force. The figure retaliated with a wave of dark energy, but Sanji dodged with a graceful flip, his body twisting mid-air as he launched a fiery Diaboljam kick that engulfed the figure in flames. The shadowy foe let out a piercing scream as it disintegrated, leaving Sanji panting but victorious. Nami and Usopp, though not as physically powerful as their crewmates, were holding their own through sheer ingenuity. Nami wielded her Kleem attack with expert precision, summoning bolts of lightning and gusts of wind to keep a swarm of insect-like creatures at bay. Usopp, meanwhile, fired off a barrage of explosive projectiles, his aim unerring as he took out the creatures one by one. But the swarm was relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. "We need a bigger plan," Usopp shouted, his voice tinged with panic. Nami nodded, her eyes narrowing as she quickly formulated a strategy. "Cover me," she yelled, charging her Kleem attack with as much energy as she could muster. Usopp unleashed a flurry of smoke bombs, creating a thick screen that obscured their movements. Nami took advantage of the chaos, summoning a massive thundercloud that crackled with electricity. With a final, decisive strike, she brought the cloud down on the swarm, the resulting explosion of lightning obliterating the creatures in an instant. Back at the center of the battlefield, Luffy was locked in a brutal exchange with the Devourer. The creature's stolen powers made it a formidable opponent, its attacks a chaotic mix of elemental forces and physical might. Luffy dodged a barrage of razor-sharp rock shards, only to be met with a blast of freezing wind that threatened to encase him in ice. But Luffy was determined, his will unbreakable as he pushed past his limits. He activated Gear 4th, his body swelling with power as he launched himself at the Devourer. The two clashed in a flurry of blows, each strike sending shockwaves through the air. Luffy's fists moved like pistons, each punch landing with the force of a cannonball, but the Devourer's stolen powers allowed it to absorb much of the damage. The creature retaliated with a devastating punch of its own, sending Luffy flying into a nearby rock formation. Luffy groaned as he pulled himself to his feet, his body aching from the impact. But he couldn't afford to rest. The Devourer was already charging at him, its maw wide open as it prepared to unleash another wave of corrosive energy. Luffy's mind raced as he tried to come up with a new strategy. He knew he couldn't overpower the creature with brute force alone. He needed to outsmart it. As the Devourer lunged at him, Luffy ducked under its attack, his body twisting as he delivered a powerful uppercut to the creature's jaw. The force of the blow sent the Devourer staggering, but Luffy didn't stop there. He followed up with a series of rapid punches, each one landing with pinpoint accuracy. The Devourer roared in frustration, its stolen powers flaring to life as it unleashed a massive wave of energy that engulfed the battlefield. Luffy gritted his teeth as he felt the energy wash over him, the sheer force of it threatening to overwhelm him. But he refused to back down. With a roar of his own, he pushed through the energy wave, his body glowing with a fierce light as he tapped into his conqueror's haki. The air around him crackled with power as he launched himself at the Devourer one final time. His fist connected with the creature's chest, the impact sending a shockwave that rippled through the island. The Devourer let out a final, ear-splitting scream as its body began to crumble, the stolen powers within it dissipating into the air. As the dust settled, Luffy stood victorious, his body battered but unbroken. Around him, his crewmates emerged from the chaos, each one bearing the scars of their battles but alive and triumphant. The island, now free from the Devourer's influence, began to stabilize, the chaotic energy that had once consumed it fading away. Luffy looked around at his crew, a proud smile spreading across his face. They had faced impossible odds and pushed past their limits to emerge victorious. And as they prepared to set sail once more, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as a crew. The air was thick with tension as Luffy stood at the edge of the crumbling island, his straw hat casting a shadow over his determined eyes. The ground beneath him pulsed with an eerie energy, as if the island itself were alive, feeding on the remnants of devil fruit power scattered across its surface. This was no ordinary battlefield, this was a place where the very essence of devil fruits was consumed, leaving their users powerless. But Luffy, driven by his unyielding will and the bonds he shared with his crew, refused to back down. Across from him stood the island's malevolent guardian, a towering figure cloaked in shadows, its form shifting and writhing like a living nightmare. The final battle had reached its climax, and the fate of the island, and perhaps the entire world, hung in the balance. Luffy's fists clenched, his body trembling from exhaustion. His Gear 4th form had pushed him to his absolute limit, his muscles screaming in protest with every movement. The Guardian, a manifestation of the island's insatiable hunger, lashed out with tendrils of darkness, each strike threatening to drain Luffy's strength entirely. But Luffy's resolve burned brighter than ever. "I'm not losing here," he roared, his voice echoing across the battlefield. "Not to you, not to anyone. My crew's counting on me, and I'm gonna protect them." The Guardian's laughter was a hollow, grating sound, like the grinding of stone against stone. "Foolish mortal," it hissed, its voice reverberating through the air. "Your power is nothing but a fleeting spark. This island will consume you, just as it has consumed countless others. Your devil fruit will be mine." Luffy's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. He knew he couldn't rely on his devil fruit abilities alone, not here, not against an enemy that thrived on them. He needed something more, something that came from within. With a deep breath, he released his Gear 4th form, his body shrinking back to its normal size. The Guardian sneered, mistaking his retreat for surrender. "Giving up so soon?" it taunted. But Luffy wasn't giving up. He was adapting. Drawing on the lessons he'd learned throughout his journey, the strength of his friends, the wisdom of his mentors, and the unbreakable spirit that defined him, he focused his energy inward. His fists began to glow with a faint, golden light, a manifestation of his haki reaching its peak. This wasn't just armament haki, it was something deeper, something primal. It was the embodiment of his will, his determination to protect what mattered most. The Guardian lunged, its shadowy form surging forward like a tidal wave. Luffy met it head-on, his glowing fists slamming into the darkness with a force that sent shockwaves rippling through the air. The impact was deafening, the clash of wills shaking the very foundations of the island. Luffy gritted his teeth, his arms trembling as he pushed back against the Guardian's overwhelming power. "I'm not just fighting for myself," he shouted, his voice raw with emotion. "I'm fighting for my crew, for my friends, for everyone who believes in me. And that's why I'll never lose." The Guardian faltered, its form flickering as if Luffy's words had struck a chord deep within its core. But it quickly recovered, its attacks growing more frenzied, more desperate. Luffy dodged and weaved, his movements a blur of speed and precision. Each punch he landed sent cracked spider webbing through the Guardian's shadowy form, but it refused to fall. The battle dragged on, both combatants pushed to their absolute limits. Finally, with a roar that seemed to shake the heavens themselves, Luffy unleashed his ultimate attack. Channeling every ounce of his strength, his haki, and his unyielding spirit, he delivered a devastating blow straight to the Guardian's core. The impact was cataclysmic, a blinding explosion of light and energy that consumed everything in its path. When the dust settled, the Guardian was gone, its malevolent presence erased from existence. The island, freed from its influence, began to crumble, its unnatural energy dissipating into the air. Luffy collapsed to his knees, his body spent. But even in his exhaustion, he managed a triumphant grin. "We did it," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Around him, the Straw Hat crew emerged from the shadows, battered but alive. They rushed to his side, their faces a mix of relief and awe. "Luffy," Nami cried, tears streaming down her face. "You crazy idiot, you actually did it." As the island disintegrated around them, the crew made their escape, carrying their captain to safety. The battle was over, but its impact would be felt for years to come. The destruction of the island marked the end of a dark chapter in the world's history, a chapter defined by the exploitation and consumption of devil fruits. With the Guardian gone, the balance of power began to shift, opening the door to new possibilities and new challenges. In the days that followed, the Straw Hats found themselves hailed as heroes, their actions sparking a wave of change across the seas. But for Luffy, the victory was bittersweet. He had faced the limits of his strength and emerged stronger, but he knew the road ahead would be even harder. The world was changing, and with it, the stakes were higher than ever. As he stood on the deck of the Thousand Sunny, gazing out at the horizon, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. "We've got a lot more adventures ahead of us," he said, his voice filled with determination. "And I'm ready for whatever comes next." The crew cheered, their spirits lifted by their captain's unwavering resolve. Together, they sailed into the unknown, their bond stronger than ever. The island that devoured devil fruits was gone, but its legacy would live on, not as a symbol of fear, but as a reminder of the power of will, friendship, and the unbreakable spirit of those who dared to dream.